Well, did Jan Napolitano just pull an Eric Holder? Homeland Security Chief Jan Napolitano says Arizona's illegal immigration law invites racial profiling. But does Secretary Napolitano really know what the law says? Now, listen to the Secretary being questioned by Senator John McCAIN.
Have you had a chance to review the new law that was passed by the state of Arizona?
I've not reviewed it in detail. I certainly know of it, Senator.
Earlier, Senator McCAIN went on the record about his state's controversial law. Senator, nice to see you, sir.
Thank you.
Senator, I have a copy of a letter I got from one of my colleagues dated May 18th. It is to the Assistant Secretary of State, Michael Posner, by you and Senator Kyle, your colleague, asking him for an apology on behalf of, I guess, Arizona. Why?
Apparently, Mr. Posner compared the immigration law in Arizona, which I'm sure he has not read, with the human rights abuses that have taken place in China. A regime that killed millions of its citizens, has detained without cause, abuses, oppresses the people of Tibet. The list goes on and on. Comparing the Arizona law to what takes place in China is an absolute outrage.
Well, as a follow-up to that, P.J. Crowley, who's the spokesperson for the State Department, said essentially that he backs up what Mr. Posner says, but then he says, Crowley, that he hasn't read the statute. Your thought about that?
I mean, you know, it's so disturbing to hear this portrayal by the liberal media and by people in the State Department of a bill that they haven't read. The Attorney General of the United States said that he hadn't read after he'd said he was considering bringing suit against the Arizona law. It's really remarkable. And the fact is, the Arizona law is a law that was bred by the frustration of the people of Arizona because the federal government would not enforce its responsibilities to secure the borders.
You mentioned
that. But just a second, I mean, to compare it with the human rights abuses that take place in China, for Mr. Crowley to make a comment about a law he hasn't read, I mean, it's so irresponsible and it's unfair not only to the people of Arizona, but the people of this country to make comments about legislation that they don't even know what's contained in it. I
don't mean to be flip, sir, but I guess that in terms of this whole human rights discussion, it might be better to focus on Mexico, where people have been beheaded. Last week, a police officer shot in broad daylight. Now 2 other police officers under house arrest with the thought that they are involved. The country is replete with corruption. What are we doing about Mexico? Well, Mexico is in an existential struggle for its survival with the drug cartels. I admire President Calderon. If the wrong guy had won that election, and if the wrong guy wins the next election, then you're going to see a kind of a thing that took place in Colombia before President Uribe came to power, and that is they'll just turn a blind eye to the drug cartels. The corruption is rife, just as you said, and the problems are enormous, and the brutality is beyond description. You know, a wedding the other day, they took the groom, his brother, and a nephew out and killed them, right out of the wedding ceremony. I mean, the brutality is beyond belief. But the fact is that Calderon is trying hard, and we are working with the Mexican government. And they do have a legitimate point when he will say, when he's here in Washington, that we are creating the demand for these $65 billion a year or whatever it is, drugs that are coming across the border. They have corruption. They have enormous difficulties. We should work closely with them and try to help them in this struggle against the drug cartels. Well, then I guess the thought is, if it's as bleak as it is, you say, in Mexico, and I was actually down there with Secretary of State Clinton a while back, and everything we saw was horrendous, including a lot of the weapons that have been seized by the authorities there. Is that why isn't the federal government doing something to protect Arizona from having that violence, that horrible human rights violations in Mexico, export from that country into our country? They're not doing enough, and the fact is that way back in 2007, some of us saw this dramatic increase in violence and knew that it was going to spill across our border. And we're very fortunate, frankly, Greta, that there hasn't been more of it. And so if we don't secure our border, sooner or later, something really bad is going to happen. And it won't be maybe just come from Mexico. It could come from someplace else in the form of a terrorist act.
Every government has a responsibility to its citizens to secure its borders. The people in the southern part of my state are living in some parts of it in circumstances we should ask no citizen to live under. They can't go to the bus stop, their homes are being invaded, their property is being violated, and the drug cartels are becoming better equipped, better armed, better orchestrated, and a greater challenge to our law enforcement people. And meanwhile, this administration refuses to send a guard to the border, which is clearly needed.
And you've asked for it now twice. Yesterday in a letter with Senator Kyle and about 2 weeks ago. Is that right? Something
yes.
like that.
Yeah.
All right.
And by the way, Senator Kyle and I have a 10-point plan that we are confident, and so are our other friends in enforcement, that would secure the border.
Now, had the election gone the other way, I'd be posing the same question to you or asking, is it, but President Obama, when he ran for office for president, like you did, promised an immigration reform policy. Why do we get zippo? And he's not the first one to make that promise. Presidents before him have, but absolutely nothing, I mean, virtually nothing has been done.
Well, here's the problem, and I'll try to be brief. In the 1980s, under President Reagan, we gave amnesty to 2 million people who are in this country illegally and promised to secure the borders. We didn't secure the borders. In the 90s, we promised to secure the borders. We didn't. And now here we are in 2010 with many saying we got to have comprehensive immigration reform. We can't do that until we have this border secure. Otherwise, we're like a hamster on a wheel, because if once you address it in a comprehensive fashion, if millions more are coming in illegally, then you're going to have to start all over again. That's why the emphasis has to be on border security, then address the rest of the issue.
All right, why, if it's gone back to President Reagan and presidents on both sides of the aisle and senators on both sides of the aisle and congressmen on both sides of the aisle, why isn't that done? We hear that from everybody. If everyone says that should be done, why isn't it done?
I think a number of factors. One, not making use of the technology that's available and providing the manpower and completing the fence. Another is there are certain forces that say, you know, this is a good workforce supply and, you know, maybe we ought to let more people come in. But in the last couple of years of the Bush administration, they got serious about border security and we made significant progress. This administration is not serious.
Are you still in favor of path to citizenship?
Yes, and a legal temporary worker program that is much needed also, particularly in the agricultural sector. But first, we have to get the border secured.
Next, is Senator McCAIN getting snubbed by the White House? Wait a few minutes to decide that one, because we have much more with Senator McCAIN next, plus 2 political